It is glorious moment to extend my warm wishes on behalf of the Human Resource Development Cell SRCC. Good afternoon, everyone. If one takes a closer look at the achievement of this person, his distinct virtues pop ups. Beside perseverance and hard work, his devotion and sacrifice for our Mother India is worth appreciating. Coupled with an impressive background, it is therefore not surprising that he is a retired General former 15 Corps Commander, Kashmir, Chief of Integrated Defense Staff, as well as motivational TEDx speaker. He wrote his very first book, expressing the feelings of our brave soldiers. Our esteemed speaker is the author of India's Braveheart, Untold Stories from the Indian Army. Now, not creating more suspense with deep pride, I introduce the keynote speaker for this session, an individual who has effected change and has action are respected and followed. We have Lieutenant General Satish Dua, sir. We are thankful to you, sir, for taking out your precious time for this session. We are super excited to wave with your energy and learn from you the life lessons. I would like to request everyone to keep themselves muted in order to maintain decorum in the session. With great enthusiasm, I would now request sir to bestow us with his words.
Thank you, Ashi, and Jai Hind, everybody. It's such a pleasure and a delight to be here amongst the youth. Thank you for inviting me to this Sri Ram Red Brick Summit. As always, I'm very, very happy to connect with the youth. You are the leaders of tomorrow. You are going to take the country forward. You will take the world forward. But let me begin by saying that you all are smarter than me. Each generation has to be smarter than the previous one. Otherwise, we'd still be living on trees, if you pardon my re-paraphrasing the essence of Darwin's theory. Why then am I here in front of you? I think it must be only my gray hair, the sign of experience. Plainly put, I was just born before you. And I often hear this lament amongst my generation. In fact, people even younger to me say that today's youth is very casual. He's hooked to the mobile. He's dependent on Google. He plays games online rather than in the playground. But I always say that and say to them, the Olympic records are always being broken. Today's youth is perhaps more fitness and diet conscious than we were in our generation. Very young people, 20-something, are creating magic. Mark Zuckerberg was in his 20s when he created Facebook and in turn, the social media. Ritesh Agarwal of the Oyo fame, he is just 26 to 27 years old. And there are many, many more such stories. It is not only in the civil and the corporate world. I see a similar sentiment in the army also, where people of my generation felt that the younger generation is a little too casual, not very well disciplined, etc. But you see how these young leaders, the young leaders of men, how they've covered themselves up in glory, whether it was Kashmir or Kargil. Do you recall every year at Kargil war anniversary, we celebrate the stories of bravery, of valor, of the Til Mange more fame, Captain Vikram Batra, Paramveer Chakra, or Manoj Kumar Pandey, or Anuj Nair, or Vijayan Thapar, and so many more names I can take. Each one of them were less than 25 years old. That young leaders of men who led men, soldiers, much more senior to them in age, older than them, they led them in battle from the front and made the supreme sacrifice. Whether it was Kargil or Kashmir. In Kashmir, we hear stories of these young men leading with pride and elan day after day. Indian Army, Indian Army today has the highest officer man casualty ratio in the world. What does that show? It shows that officers, mostly young officers, because they are in charge of platoons and companies, mostly young officers, they lead from the front, undeterred by dangers, risk their lives, and quite often make the supreme sacrifice. Let me tell you a very touching tale of Captain Pavan. 5, 6 years ago, when I was the Corps commander in Kashmir, one day I visited the base hospital. The base hospital at Badami Bagh cantonment gets a lot of casualties, and they are not lifestyle diseases. The casualties over there in the wards are all either gunshot wounds or grenade splinter injuries, or somebody's blown up a foot on a mine, and such like injuries. The commandant told me, the specialist told me that, sir, there is a young captain who's refusing to go on sick leave. So when I walked into the officer ward, I wanted to know, why doesn't he want to go on sick leave? Sick leave is when a patient does not require constant medical care, but only some time to heal. Then he's sent home on 2 or 3 or 4 weeks of sick leave, and after which he returns back to the hospital before he goes to the unit. So I asked this young man I saw there, I said, why don't you want to go on sick leave? He says, sir, I want to be with the boys. Good Josh. I was bemused. He was a young boy himself, and he says, I want to be with the boys. I couldn't help asking him. I said, how old are you, son? He said, 23, sir. 23 years old. And he says, I want to be with the boys. You know what are boys? In the army, we call our soldiers, endearingly, we call them boys. His boys, he was a special forces officer. His boys, as he called them, were all seasoned paracommandos, special forces soldiers in their 30s, a couple of them even maybe in their 40s. And he said, I want to go back to them. I don't want to go home on chutti. This boy, this young lad was younger than my younger son. I just broke protocol. I ruffled his hair and I said, happy hunting, son. And I told the brigadier, I said, Doc, let him do what he wants. Two weeks later, I saluted his dead body in a casket. No matter how many times I relate this incident, it always has me overwhelmed at this point. You may recall that in February 2016, 20th or 21st February of 2016, 4 suicide terrorists had taken over, in the biggest hostage situation in Kashmir, had taken over a 6-storied building in outskirts of Kashmir or Srinagar, and had taken 66 Kashmiri men and women hostage. A 2-day long operation. We got all the 66 men and women out of the hostage situation, but we paid a heavy price. 3 of them, including Captain Pavan, made the supreme sacrifice. He could have been sitting at home. He just had a fractured jaw for which he was being treated earlier. I have written about this as one of the stories in the book India's Brave Hearts that you just heard about. Such are the inspirational stories of these young men and women who lead from the front. And it is not only in the army. As I mentioned earlier, it is you all. You don't have to be in the army, and I'll talk about that later, to serve the country. It is happening everywhere. It is the youth who are starting their, you have so much of your network revolutions, the kind of software revolutions and the internet revolution, the innovative ideas, the startups, all that is being given shape by the youth, tomorrow's generation. And we are very proud of the youth. Today, you have so many opportunities. You have different fields open in front of you. When we were young, we did not have so many different opportunities, lines of opportunities for us. I remember, either you could join the NDA or join the army or armed forces, or you could become a doctor or engineer. Today, and then we had there was somebody who wasn't interested in art, but he was trying to become a doctor, or an engineer, or somebody is interested in literature, was aspiring to be a doctor. I myself started off by joining MBBS first year, and I left that to join the NDA when I got a call letter from NDA. I don't know how good a doctor I would have been, but I would have really missed this life that army offers. The spirit of adventure at every step in your life, the sense of belonging, the sense of camaraderie that you share with your colleagues, the high of living on the edge and being able to do something for your country by being there, out there in the front line. I wouldn't trade that for anything else in my life. So, friends, it is very important for us, for you, to identify your passion. You must see what is it that drives you. What is it that gives you satisfaction? What is it that makes you happy? Because then your work will not be, it will not be a drudgery. You will want to get to work every day. Identify your passion. And if you can turn your passion into your profession, nothing like it. And for some reason, if you can't, then utilize your passion as a creative outlet. Let me give you a couple of other thoughts. Dream big. If you can identify your passion and make it your profession, nothing like it. But whether or not, dream big. It is always the dreamers who change the world. Whether it was Dhirubhai Ambani or Bill Gates, they all could make it big only because they had a dream to realize. I'm going to quote Bernard Shaw, who said this, and I've made this quote my own ethos in life. And I quote, "Men see things as they are and wonder why." I repeat, men see things as they are and wonder why. I dream of things that never were and say, why not? That is the kind of spirit that is required. When you dream big, question the basics, question the status quo. And then it's only if you dream big that you can achieve your dreams and beyond. Next, be positive. I know in today's world, we are living in testing times during the corona crisis. Testing positive is a very negative thing, and I'm going to talk about it in the end, about the current crisis. But harness the power of positive thinking, positive attitude. That is something, an intangible, which is very, very important. Always be positive. When you steadily intend towards something, it is then that you will get it. It is then that the universe will conspire to give it to you. It is then, it is said, that your will becomes one with the divine will. In Hindu mythology, we talk about Atma or Paramatma ka milan. So remember, harnessing the power of positive attitude is everything. You all are too young to recall, but if someone has seen an old movie called Om Shanti Om, in which Shah Rukh Khan has made this popular in a dialogue, and he says, "अगर किसी चीज को पूरे दिल से चाहो, तो सारी कायनात उसे तुमसे मिलाने में जुड़ जाती है." So essentially, what I told you earlier, the whole universe will then conspire to give it to you. If you have a positive attitude, if you identify your passion, and if you can actually make it your profession, harness the power of positive thinking, dream big, a good combination of all this, and you can actually turn failures into opportunities. Because lurking in every failure are opportunities. And to turn failure into opportunities, you require abundance of positive energy, a positive attitude, and those big, lofty dreams. Let me talk about my experience at UDI. when if I were to talk to you about UDI, and I've done that. Today we are talking in a virtual medium, but I've done that on a stage when I'm talking to hundreds of college students together. If I were to ask you what comes to your mind when I talk about UDI, perhaps each one of you will talk about how's the Josh, the high Josh, or you'll talk about a surgical strike after UDI. Am I right? I'm sure I am. But for me, UDI is the darkest day of my life. I was the co-commander when 4 terrorists, a suicide terrorist, stuck at our camp in UDI, and we lost 18 soldiers, 18 young lives lost on my watch. It is the darkest Sunday that I've had. There was so much gloom in the atmosphere. The whole country was incensed. There was anger in the nation against Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. My soldiers wanted revenge. The leadership was agitated, and we decided to turn this pain into an opportunity. The leadership was bold enough. They gave us a free hand, and we decided that thus far and no further, because Pakistan sends in terrorists who create violence in J&K, and they have a deniability factor. They send in terrorists, not even their soldiers. And we are unable to cause that pain, that hurt to them. And we are only defensive. So we decided to cause that hurt, to cause that pain. And rest is all history. Surgical strikes happened, where we went across into the terror camps in their territory and hit across at the terror camps. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the essence of trying to look for opportunities. And as you all know, it's a matter of record. Fortune favors the brave. We did not have a single casualty. So we salute the soldiers who executed the surgical strikes. And we remember with gratitude those who made the supreme sacrifice in UDI. But this is an example I would like to quote, where in dark depths of failure, we almost always look for a silver lining. And combining positive attitude, a lofty dream, the spirit of camaraderie, try to achieve that. Next, I'd like to talk about something which is very, very contemporary. And today, in your hands, all of you have great enablers. When I had to listen to the news, I had to listen to the radio. Today, you have everything in this little mobile phone of yours, whether it is social media, news channels, newspapers, every other platform that you need to get your news and views, and many other things, many other functions are all in this mobile phone. You have great enablers in terms of data, electronics, networks, servers. I mean, there are so many things that I can't even name them. When I was a teenager and I had to listen to the news, I had to switch on a radio. A radio, mind you, not a transistor. It does not come on immediately. A radio has a radio valve. It takes a couple of minutes to heat up. It's like a small filament, like a small bulb. When it heats up and the radio comes to life, then you actually move the dial to tune the needle to the correct channel. The moment it came there, it took few more seconds, and then it started off. This is All India Radio giving you the news. And there was only one channel, that was All India Radio, and his Hindi counterpart. So nearly 2.5 minutes have elapsed before I put on the radio until I start hearing the news. 2.5 minutes. In today's world, in 2.5 minutes, a sensational news goes viral. There are millions of posts and reposts in so many different platforms across the social media. I can't even begin to count the different platforms that are available. You post and repost. When you repost a particular news, do you check the authenticity? No, you just post it, repost it, send it to your friends, to other WhatsApp groups, to Signal, Telegram, and so many of them. News goes viral very fast. But then, do we know if the news is correct? Do we know if the news is right? So while you have great enablers at your disposal, it also places that responsibility on you, that you have to be discerning. You have to develop the ability to discern, to differentiate, to make out the difference between the right and the wrong news, the fake news, misinformation, disinformation, and there's a difference. So the point that I'm trying to make, with all these enablers, you have an information overload. It is for you to be discerning. Don't try to react on everything. And please remember, I have seen that world and I'm seeing this world today. And I say that with all responsibility. Please remember, today, perception has started becoming more important than the reality. Please try to look for reality. What is happening? Whether it is a protest at some place, or whether it is an agitation at another place, whether it is a crisis that is happening nowadays, and I'll talk about that a little later. Whether it is India-China face-off in Ladakh, or the riots in the US Capitol Hill in January. What is the reality and what is the perception? It is for us to be able to discern and differentiate. And if we can't, then take a breather, take a pause. Don't try to act or react on something that you're not very sure about. I think that is the responsibility that gets automatically placed on every citizen. Because in today's world, you have these enablers, you have to act with responsibility. It is something like, if a soldier has weapons in his hand, he has to act responsible. He just can't keep shooting in the wild. I have seen, talking of soldiering, I see a lot of josh. I see a lot of enthusiasm in youngsters today. And during various interactions, and even otherwise on social media, people write to me and they say, we want to join the army. We want to serve the country. And to each one of them, I always say, You are welcome. We need enthusiastic, patriotic young men and women like you. And you are welcome. You're welcome to join the Army, Navy, and the Air Force. But remember, you do not have to join the army to serve the country. You don't have to join the armed forces to serve the country. You can also serve the country by doing what you do to the best of your ability. Give in your best. Give in your best, because the growth story of our country, the growth story of our country needs each one of you. It's not only the soldiers or soldiering. It's not a particular walk of professional life. It is each one of you is required for the growth story of India. The engineers, the software, the corporate guys, the hotel managers, the service providers, all kind of skill sets are required for to take the country forward. And yes, if you want to do something for the country, something for the soldier, if you want to respect the soldier, then be a good citizen. Be a citizen worth dying for. Because the soldier who goes and sacrifices his life, he should not be doing it for an ungrateful nation. And believe me, friends, being a good citizen is a very tough call. Being a good citizen is a work of, is an act of responsibility. And before I end, I would like to talk about this, about being a good citizen, and talk about the today's testing times that we live in. Being a good citizen acquires even more importance in these testing times of a corona crisis that we are reeling under, that the world is dealing with for the last over 1 year. First of all, I think it is very important for us to be a good citizen, to be a responsible citizen. When I say to be a responsible citizen, I mean that follow all the protocols, follow all the norms that are being promulgated, whether it is to do with wearing masks or keeping distance, washing your hands, all the basics that are being promulgated, that we all know about, but some of us fail to follow them, fail to implement them when required. So we need to be responsible. We not only need to be responsible for ourselves, but we also need to educate our family, our community, our neighborhood, and spread awareness. On the other hand, be a good citizen. That was being responsible. Now, being a good citizen. Being a good citizen means within your own limitations, within the limits of your capabilities, please reach out, help others. And during this last 1 year, we all have seen that so many people have started coming out with a helping hand to their families, to their communities, to in any which way they can. Many people, many organizations, many NGOs, especially youth, have come forward and they've started helping people. I have seen youth coming and helping the elderly in their communities, buildings and condos, towns and villages. So that is the kind of sense of responsibility that is required from the youth. There are a few examples, some not so good examples, but I think we need to look at and focus at those that are positive examples and try and draw lessons from them. And I will not say saving the best for the last, because in the end, I'm going to talk about something that you and I and the whole country is not happy about. And that is what is happening today. In the last 1 month or thereabouts, I think the situation in India has suddenly taken a turn for the worse. So bad that it is running amok. It is going out of control. All the data is negative. The number of patients testing positive, the number of uh, deaths, how we are able to cope up with the critical care in the end or not, all that is nothing to be proud of. So we need to learn lessons. Firstly, in stemming the rot, stopping it now, and getting it under control. And second, instead of getting into a blame game, there will be time for that later. Now it's the time for us to come together to try and fight this together. This is not the time to sensationalize. This is the time to act with sensitivity. And you, the youth, whatever agitates you in today's situation, keep that agitation alive in your heart. Remember that you have to deal with such crisis later. Whether it is corona or any other such emergency, let us learn positive lessons out of this. And you have actually seen a very big major crisis, humanitarian crisis. Not everyone gets an opportunity. I wish that we don't have to go through such opportunities, but you have had a chance. You've seen this live. You stand better qualified to be able to deal with such crisis. I wish you all the very best. The leaders of tomorrow, not happy to be handing over such a bad situation, but we together, we will overcome. And I wish you all a great life. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insightful words. Now we will be taking up the questions from the audience. First, we have Shruti. Shruti, please unmute yourself.
Sir, first of all, thank you for such an insightful session. I want to ask that what was the most difficult choice you had to make when you were active in duty, and how did you deal with it?
That's a good question, Shruti. You know what's a good question? A good question is one to which there are no easy answers. Yes, so there are several situations in active duty, especially for soldiers, where you have to deal with choices. They are not pleasant sometimes. When I say active soldiering, because say if you are working in the corporate world, you have to make tough choices. It happens everywhere. But if you have to make tough choices in a corporate world, in a worst case scenario, it will end up in profit and loss of targets and timelines. But in my profession, it can end up with lives. So there are situations, for instance, please allow me not to give you specifics. It is not may not be correct to the memories of those involved. But there have been situations where in a particular gun battle that is going on with terrorists, and say one or two of our men have been hit by bullet injuries, grenades, splinters, etc. Now there is a limited manpower that you have. So do you detach it to carry two men? It will require at least 8, if not more, normally more, men to carry them down. Now, can you send away 8 to 12 men to take them to the hospital, which because you are in a jungle and a mountain and it is going to take 3 hours of walk to walk down, carrying somebody? Or do you finish this encounter which is going on? Because when you withdraw more soldiers from one place, then you are also making the rest who are left fighting with the terrorists, they become very vulnerable. So those are the tough choices one has to make at times. May I just leave it at that? And so, and everyone has to really draw lessons for themselves on the spot, and there are no set solutions.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for answering this.
Thank you, Shruti.
Next, we have Akshat. Please ask your question.
So first of all, it was really nice to listen to you. Sir, I have a
Thank you.
question. So we are seeing a logistical failure in context of COVID-19, especially in the cities like Delhi. So there is extreme oxygen shortage. And so yesterday, India witnessed more than 3,200 deaths. So, sir, considering all these, do you think that logistical operation of the supply chain should be taken over by the military?
So, Akshat, it's like this. I understand within the limits of your experiences in life. Today, military is called for every emergency, whether it is earthquakes or floods, whether it is a law and order situation or an internal security terrorist situation. In every situation, it is military that is called out. This kind of I am not saying the military should not help. Military is already helping in the ways it can. And I'm sure it is as it is appearing, and it is taking on more and more responsibility. But I want to tell you also that remember that a state, when I say state, I'm talking about country. A country in this case has many more organizations and resources. There is a disaster management authority. There is a disaster management force that we have recruited. They have a lot of expertise and equipment for this sort of a thing. There are other forces, paramilitary forces or police forces. They're called Central Armed Police Forces, which also have manpower that can do all this. So the point I'm trying to make is that let us not be quick to use the military as a first response. In a situation like this, military has already stepped in. In fact, just 3 days ago, all the retired medical and paramedical staff, retired of the military, has been called. I hope we are doing the similar things in the government service also. There have been retired medical and paramilitary staff. But since military is a more organized, more disciplined force, we all tend to look towards military, and military should participate in doing whatever it can. But we must remember that don't always shoot the last bolt first. So try and use other resources also is what I would like to advise you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next, we have Sanchit. Please unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, sir. So it was a very inspiring session. So my question is that you were the chief of integrated defense staff, and therefore were responsible for maintaining synergy between the forces. We as the members of the Human Resource Development Cell would very much like to know how do you manage to do that, and what are the essentials for ensuring any kind of synergy between people?
You see, after World War II, the world realized that war cannot be fought in silos between army separate and air force separate. It has to be a combined affair. So much so that it is required to integrate them. So most big militaries in the world got on to integrating their structures. They had some friction, but they started integrating their structures between army, navy, and air force. India was very slow to do that. It took us 5 wars and 5 decades to do that. It's only after Kargil war that we started seriously doing it. So we established a headquarter IDS. When you said I was chief of IDS, yes, that was the structure that was raised, and a few others after Kargil war. But again, the government, the leadership stopped short. They did not appoint a CDS. So till the CDS was appointed last year, till then, the IDS was doing that role of integration, as you asked, of synergizing between Army, Navy, and Air Force. it was not very effective because chief of IDS, of which I also held that for 2 years, post for 2 years. The chief of IDS had a status of vice chief. It is not full-blown chief. Today CDS is there. He's above all the three chiefs in terms of first among equals. So he can be more effective. But when I was IDS, if your question is only limited to that, but I don't think we should leave it there. Now, with the CDS having been appointed, the integration, the synergy, the jointness between Army, Navy, Air Force is improving by leaps and bounds. And as per the mandate given to him, in the next 3 years, he is supposed to have some integrated structures that are going to come up, and that we will see as the time passes. But the last sentence, integration enhances the combat potential, and integration also gives resource optimization. That is, it cuts down costs because you don't have to duplicate and triplicate the facilities. You can combine the facilities of Army, Navy, and Air Force. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Now we will be taking some questions from the chat box. First question is, how is army life different from a normal person's life?
Sorry, Army life different from normal?
From a normal person's life.
Right. Well, anyone, you, your friends, anyone would take up a profession, right? When you come of age and qualification, then you start working somewhere. You will take up, I repeat myself, you will be into some profession. And let's say I join the army, or whoever joins the army or armed forces. When you join the army, it is not only a profession. It is fully a way of life. And there is a very subtle difference. So that is the essential difference. It is not something that you will leave today and tomorrow you will jump to another job because you're getting a better pay package, or you're getting a better opportunity for growth, or you are getting a better opportunity in whichever way. This is a different way of life. You will continue to progress in that slow, methodical manner. And that is why the army is a great profession where you invest so much more time, energy, resource, and money in let me say, skilling and training that person again and again at different levels, so that when he comes to that level, when he becomes a company commander, when he becomes a battalion commander, when he becomes he is trained better and better to acquit those responsibilities. Why is this required? It is required because at every level, if that leader is not qualified and trained enough, his decisions can lead to loss of lives. In other professions, like I mentioned in another answer, in another question, at worst, it can draw some losses and profits. The factory can close or shut down or run very well. In this case, it will affect human lives. And your bad decisions, a leader's bad decisions, can affect the life of his soldiers, can affect the territorial integrity of his country. So hence, these in army and armed forces, the stakes are very high, very different, and at a very different level. If my soldiers die, only I know the pain. Did you notice? I still say it happened on my watch. I lost 18 soldiers on my watch. I will never be able to sort of live that down till my last dying day. Compare that with any other profession, any other life. That's what he says. So a person and an army life, there is that basic difference. And let me start with the first sentence. This is not a profession. It is a full-blown way of life. I hope I've answered your question.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much. Next, we have a question. You were the person behind the surgical strikes. How did you plan keeping it in mind, the expectation of the people of India. Was there anything particular that you had to keep in mind or something that you feel pressure?
Today, the country calls it surgical strike. Do you think I thought about it, or we thought about it like that on 18th of September 2016 when we lost soldiers? We were down in dumps on knees for more than a day. How could you, when you see body piled up and so, I mean, that scenes, I can't live that down in my life. You see fires raging, all that was that stretches in your nose. You think that time we thought that is going to be one surgical strike and there will be a Vicky Kaushal's movie after that and we will say, how's the Josh? No, sir. No, ma'am. Nothing at all. We were sad at losing our soldiers. We were sad at the fact that Pakistan sends in terrorists and the terrorists come and do this strikes and go away. It's a low-cost option for them. He doesn't even lose a single soldier. So we decided that we are going to do something. The leadership was bold enough to allow us to give us a free hand to do it, go across and do it. We did it. At that moment, and I've written up this in my book also, when our men were across, I was not even wishing for the success of the operation called surgical strike. I was wishing that my men should come back safe. And I've very honestly admitted to that. More than success of the operation, I was wanting my men to come back safe, and that's what happened. Well, we got both. So at that moment, we were not, yes, what we were thinking of, to answer your question before I end, yes, we did think that enough is enough. We need to hit back. We cannot continue to only be defensive. What do we do? How do we hit them back? And that is where I think that resolve, which got its aspiration in strong backing, because next day the country owned up. You took a press conference and the DGMO came in front of the world and said, we did it. Unlike Pakistan, which says terrorists, sent terrorists, and they said, no, no, we have not sent them. They are your own freedom fighters. Whereas we said, no, we did it. We did it because you did that. So I think that is what happened. But to answer your question, at that moment, one did not imagine that this is going to be so big, or this is going to be so successful. And when I say successful, I was sure of the success. I mean, we were very confident of the success, but we were not confident that we will not have any casualties. So fortune favors the brave. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Your words are a great source of inspiration for all of us.
Thank you.
So our question is, you said in a TEDx speech that in your life, you either win or you die. This is one of the most important principles on a battlefield. But how can we as a student can inculcate this value in our lifestyle?
So I was talking about that in a sports field context, where we said that for us, whether it is a rifle firing competition or a football match, we take every competition very seriously, more seriously than we have to. When I joined the National Defense Academy, sometimes as a young teenager, I used to feel, what a big deal about a six-string match. Fine, we should play with Josh, but why no sportsman spirit? And there's someone told me, I remember then I learned that no, in my profession, those who don't win often end up dead. There are no runners-up, there are no silver medalists, because it is kill or be killed in the battlefield. So it is to sort of inculcate that ethos, that killing spirit in a soldier, that we need to inculcate this. You need to have a killer's instinct in every walk of life, I guess. When I say killer's instinct, euphemistically, that you need to have that. But I don't think you have to go to that extremes in the corporate world, in the civil world. But yes, stay focused. Stay focused on your targets and whatever are your targets and timelines, or whatever are your targets or goals, stay focused on achieving them. So that in that context, I made the distinction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. So this question is very relatable to the current situation. How can we handle the anxiety and fear of this pandemic?
This is a tough call, and like you rightly said, this is happening happening all around us, and happening to all of us. The first thing, in fact, I have touched upon this in the talk itself in different aspects. So let me just connect those two dots myself. One, I said be positive, harness the power of positive thinking. Today, we all have become very negative. And I will correct the second one to be discerning. When a TV channel or a social media somebody is putting out, he's only putting out, he or she is, we are only getting negative news. You think there are no positive news? In today, this morning, I have tweeted saying that please don't sensationalize. We know that there is all, whether it is cremation grounds or hospitals or lack of oxygen, we know things are bad. But if you only keep talking about that, then we are only spreading negativity. Yesterday, I tweeted about a story which is, of course, now pretty viral today, and I wasn't the only one. I mean, there were many people who were doing it. It's about an 85-year-old man who gave his bed in Nagpur to a 41 or a 40-year-old because he said his children need him more. And this old man died 3 days later in his home. So there are now some people will say this is not a positive story. I am talking about that man's his spirit behind what he did. So what I am trying to say is in today's world, it is more important that we try to be good. We try to be discerning firstly. Let us not only keep at it jingoism, and like I told you all also in my talk, there will be time later. We will sort it out later. But at the moment, this is not the time for name calling, recrimination. This is the time to get together. This is the time to sit together. This is the time to help each other out. And that's where the power of positive thinking will kick in. And I think that's all we can do in the present times. What else can we do? If we stick together, we might be able to make better sense of this. And please remember, power of positive thinking also means thinking that the worst is behind us. And I'm sure it is. It'll stabilize now. And we will do better. And we will only do better if we all participate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for letting us know how we can be positive in these tough times. So we have reached at the end of our session. It was a splendid session. Thank you so much, sir, for enlightening us with your valuable thoughts and experience. We felt as we were directly listening to you. We have forgotten that we are virtually listening to you. We learned so much from you, sir, today. On the behalf of Human Resource Development Cell, SRCC, I would like to extend my heartiest thanks to you, sir. It was an honor to have you in our annual First Sri Ram Red Brick Summit 2021. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for inviting me. Once again, it was a pleasure to interact with you all. I know we are going through tough times, but with you, the youth, in leadership positions and thought, I'm sure together we will overcome this and any other crisis. Thank you. Jai Hind.